Welcome. Wherever you are, whether you're tucked beneath soft blankets, watching shadows stretch across your ceiling, or simply looking for a moment of quiet, it's time to slow the pace of your thoughts. Let your breathing deepen, the world soften, and allow your mind to drift backward, far beyond the present, into a realm of parchment and candlelight, silk and sandalwood, gold leaf and quiet ambition. Tonight, we'll step quietly into the labyrinth of Byzantine administration, a realm so intricate, so exhaustingly elaborate, it shaped and stretched an empire for more than 1,000 years. You've likely heard of emperors and wars, but there was another force that held the Eastern Roman Empire together, something less glamorous, yet utterly essential. It's bureaucracy, not the kind of word that usually sparks curiosity, but that's precisely why it's perfect for this journey. Because inside those marble halls and under flickering oil lamps were clerks and scribes, chamberlains and secretaries, all engaged in a quiet ballet of ink, scrolls, and survival. And survival wasn't always guaranteed. Tonight's story will not be one of battles or bloody conquest. Instead, we'll explore a different kind of struggle, a quieter one, the soft rustle of papyrus, the low murmur of voices debating protocol, the dull ache of hours passed at a wooden desk. But within your modest stone apartment, there's only the creak of your joints and the scratchy fabric of your tunic as you rise before dawn. So breathe deeply now, only narrow slits to let in a slice of gray morning light, and let the rhythm of another world settle over you. Imagine yourself waking up in the eastern quarter of Constantinople, perhaps in the 10th century, during the height of the Macedonian dynasty. The chrysoberyl documents, stamped with the golden seal of the emperor himself. Outside, the city hums softly. The wind carries the distant creak of masts in the Golden Horn, the squawk of gulls. You sit in a row of other clerks, each hunched over their work, their heads down, their thoughts inward. You are a grammatius, a clerk. Your office is not glamorous. It's not even particularly clean. The logothetes, to Dromu, who handles foreign correspondence and intelligence. The Sakellarios, who audits everyone else, and dozens more, each with layers beneath them, like the petals of a tightly wound flower. But then you wake up, and you are still here. It sits in the shadow of the chalk gate, close enough to the great palace to feel important, but far enough to be forgotten. A cup of wine that's more vinegar than vintage, permanently. The tips of your nails are black. You scrub them raw, but it never fades. You are expected to recognize forms, abbreviations, formulaic openings. The ink is made of soot, gall, and wine, a potent mixture, unforgiving. The break is brief, then it's back to the desk. Troops do not move. Orders do not reach governors. Monasteries cannot account for their holdings. You have never set sail, but you've read reports of pirate raids on the Black Sea. There are no windows. On feast days, you might visit the hippodrome. The noise there is too much, too fast. You prefer the stillness of the scriptorium, the low creak of the wooden floor, the rhythm of your own breath. You light a small oil lamp, the scent of olive oil sharp in your nostrils. And then the day begins, as it always does with documents. But you have little to bribe with. Your robe is plain. Your sandals are worn. The silver clasp on your belt is dull. Another day of quiet survival in the empire of ink. You gather your scrolls, tie them with thin leather strips, and place them on the filing shelf. But you stay quiet. You stay diligent. You keep your eyes low and your ink bottle full. the faint scent of myrrh and beeswax lingers in the air. A breeze, light and salt, inged from the nearby Bosporus, lifts the curtains ever so gently. Theodora's father, Acacius, tended the bears of Constantinople's circus faction, the Greens. Soap, the substance often used in some of these sketches, became an enduring part of her symbolic biography. Somewhere during these years, something within her shifted. Perhaps it was witnessing the fragile lines between wealth and ruin, or hearing whispered stories of women discarded when no longer useful to men in power. Not by title, though she would hold the rank of Augusta, but by influence. She was not ornamental. She sat beside him in council. She read and revised correspondence. She issued commands when he hesitated, and she watched. Whatever the cause, she returned to Constantinople, not just changed, but hardened, observant, prepared. But Theodora, clad in imperial purple, spoke firmly. "Royalty is a fine burial shroud," she reportedly declared. "A sentence, like a polished blade, is not always kind." She would rather die an empress than live in exile. She wielded power with purpose, and sometimes with precision that could cut something carved, coated, and set in stone. Her opponents disappeared into monasteries, or deeper into silence, a space suspended between heaven and earth, where whispers carry upward into a dome that seems too vast to have been built by hand. She was a champion of women's rights, yes, fighting trafficking, supporting abandoned girls, even establishing institutions for their care. Yet she was also ruthless in securing her position. Her influence reached into church affairs, diplomacy, and law. And though she could be warm to those in her circle, her gaze on enemies could feel like winter on marble. And yet, this cathedral, this crown jewel of Constantinople, was no quiet thing in its day. The first, built by Emperor Constantius II in the 4th century, was modest by comparison. The second, commissioned by Theodosius II, was larger, but lost to flames during riots. And so, in 532, just days after the Nika riots reduced parts of Constantinople to ash, Justinian ordered the construction of something entirely new. The light that poured through those windows wasn't incidental. It was architectural theology. Light, in Byzantine thought, represented divine wisdom. Revisions had to be made, supports added, geometry recalibrated. It was an act of devotion, and an act of engineering defiance. To fill the space with it was to reflect the presence of God Himself. Above your head, tiny golden tiles catch the light in shifting patterns. These are mosaics, some original, many altered or restored over centuries. Even the precise nature of Christ, fully divine, fully human, or something in between, could trigger riots in the street. They were more than decoration. They were coded statements of faith. During the periods of iconoclasm, when images were deemed idolatrous, the Church's brilliant faces disappeared behind plaster and silence. Under Ottoman rule, the Hagia Sophia became a mosque. Christian images were veiled, hidden chambers behind mosaics. Even tales of imperial treasures buried somewhere deep beneath the sanctuary floor, sealed behind stone and silence. And new elements appeared. Minarets piercing the sky. What strikes the soul most is not the mystery or the grandeur, but the stillness. The kind that echoes beneath a high dome, carrying prayers long forgotten and footsteps long faded. In the quiet, you feel it, not just the weight of history, but the suspension of time. As if this one place, unlike all others, has never fully left the moment of its making. Mihrab, facing Mecca, geometric calligraphy encircling the dome. Yet the space remained fundamentally unchanged, sacred, adaptable, layered. Monks who once tended the golden halos were scattered. The stone remembered, even when the walls forgot. This is the weeping column, or the wishing column. For centuries, pilgrims, first Christian, later Muslim, placed their fingers into the opening, turning them slowly in a circle, hoping for healing or luck. Some claimed the stone felt damp, as if it truly wept. It pulsed with ceremony, echoed with controversy, and bore witness to centuries of whispered secrets coded into its very walls. To less official, more whispered. Her gaze is timeless. On the arch above, emperors kneel, presenting models of the Hagia Sophia, or coins to Christ or to Mary. These images reinforce divine authority, not just of heaven, but of empire. The placement of emperors in proximity to the holy was not a flourish, it was a theological message. Rule was God-given, God-approved, God-guarded. It was built to speak and to listen. It listened to emperors and patriarchs, to soldiers and scholars, to mothers and mendicants, and it still listens, even now. Her resolve anchored the court. The rebellion was put down, and her legend was secured. Let us take one final walk to the cloistered world of silks and secrets, of eunuchs and veiled glances, where behind every curtain power waited in silence. The air smells faintly of old incense and cool stone. He wanted it grand. He wanted it eternal. Your footsteps are muffled by the worn marble beneath, smooth from centuries of processions, sandals, and silent prayers. Ahead of you, the nave opens up like a revelation, grand, soaring, and impossibly serene. Justinian would live on for nearly 2 more decades, ruling an empire he had reshaped with her at his side and then without her. In Ravenna's Basilica of San Vitale, she stares out from a wall of colored stone and glass, haloed and robed in imperial purple. Her eyes calm, searching, faintly amused, seem to know more than she reveals. The details, shaped by time and agendas, drift between accounts like the ripples of a candlelit fountain. To build a church unlike any seen before. They began with stone, timber, and ambition. But it was geometry, more than anything, that lifted Hagia Sophia toward the heavens. But what matters more than the gossip is the transformation, not through inheritance, not through conquest, but through cunning, through courage, and through the careful choreography of power. When he died, Theodora's mother pleaded for her daughter's futures before the raucous crowds of the Hippodrome, aligning herself with the rival blues in a bid for their support. It was an early lesson in politics, not of Senate halls and military campaigns, but of alliances brokered beneath striped tents and the roar of spectators. Theodora grew up learning how power moves not always in silence, but sometimes through laughter, through spectacle, and through survival. And within this gilded world of power, whispers, and unblinking eyes, walks Theodora, where a woman's life, once lived in the shadows of circus tents and humble performance, would come to reshape the destiny of an empire. She was sharp, philosophical, and unusually learned for a woman outside the nobility. Justinian was captivated. Their marriage was controversial. Laws had to be changed to allow a former entertainer to wed a man in line for the throne. But Justinian was unwavering. Scrolls upon scrolls, a mountain of parchment and vellum, each with its own ribbon and seal. Nothing is done without a seal. Your task to copy, to translate, to verify, over and over again, the Canonican tax records for the provinces. The Prostagni Imperial orders. The street smells faintly of roasting fish and chimney smoke. You walk home slowly, a world no less tangled, but infinitely more dangerous. But you do not see the emperor. You barely see your supervisor. Tight, looping letters that must be uniform, or the document could be deemed illegible and you reprimanded. The rules, impossible to memorize. Byzantium's bureaucracy is not one office, is many, fragmented, specialized. There's the logothetes Tegenikou, the fiscal minister responsible for taxes. If you're lucky, your work remains unnoticed. Mistakes draw attention, and attention in Byzantium is rarely a gift. You receive no clear promotions, no raises. Advancement comes through murky favors, whispered alliances, and more often than not bribes. Sometimes you dream of catching the eye of Omega's logothetis, a grand logothete, one of the top ministers. Lunch comes in silence, a crust of bread, some olives, the ink stains your fingers. The scripts you write are not easy either. Greek uncial, later, minuscule. And then there's the matter of language. You copy Greek, yes, but also Latin, sometimes even Syriac or Armenian. You do not write creatively. You replicate faithfully. To change even a preposition could be seen as falsification. And yet, there is pride, quiet pride. You are part of something immense. The Byzantine machine. The empire lives and breathes on paper. Without your hand, taxes do not flow. You have never wielded a sword, but you've copied 1,000 commands that moved armies. Still, your world remains narrow. At times, you overhear rumors of promotions earned by flattery, of letters lost on purpose, of clerks who vanished after altering a record too boldly. When dusk comes, your back aches, your fingers are cramped, your candle sputters. You pass through the gate under torchlight, your face cast in orange shadow. At night, you dream of golden seals, of red ribbons, of secret messages written in code. But by morning, they're forgotten, because today will be another day of copying. Let us now leave this dim-lit office and ascend carefully toward the world of power. Let us now shift our attention away from the ink-stained scrolls and into the softly echoing chambers of imperial influence. Imagine yourself again in Constantinople, this time not in a cramped scribe's alcove, but standing just beyond the marble colonnades of the great palace. She was not born into silk. Her beginnings were far from imperial. In her youth, she performed on stage, in what we might liken today to comedic sketches or bawdy improvisation roles, considered far from respectable. Imagine her later, no longer a performer, but a seeker, traveling through Egypt and Syria, pausing not just for performance, but for reflection. By the time she met Justinian, then a rising bureaucrat, nephew to the reigning Emperor She, was no longer merely an actress. When he became emperor, she became his equal. It is said that during the infamous Nika riots of 532, a boiling over of factional tension that saw the city burn and thousands perish, Justinian wavered, considering escape. But legend, Theodora's reign was not without shadows. She died in 548, possibly of cancer, her body weary, long before her ambition had faded. To this day, her image endures, not just in dusty scrolls, but in glittering mosaics. In Theodora's life, we find the unlikely truth that in an empire of scrolls and chains, one woman born beyond the palace gates could rewrite her role entirely. And now, as the twilight deepens over the imperial city, let us turn our attention to something even older. We will walk slowly now into the echoing halls of an ancient cathedral, where mosaics shimmer, light dances on polished stone, and beneath the sacred silence, 1,000 secrets sleep undisturbed. Let us now walk quietly into the sanctuary of something sacred, the Hagia Sophia, in Greek, holy wisdom. Not a saint, not a martyr, but a concept divine knowledge enshrined in stone. Imagine yourself standing at the threshold. It is early morning, and the first light of dawn presses through high, arched windows, catching flecks of dust in its golden beams. But how did it come to be? The current Hagia Sophia is actually the third version. He wanted it fast. He summoned 2 men not known as cathedral builders, but as mathematicians and engineers, Anthemius of Tralles and Isidore of Miletus. Their task: the dome was their masterpiece, massive, floating on a ring of windows that made it seem airborne, almost untethered from the earth. And yet, the building resisted permanence. Earthquakes cracked its ribs. The dome partially collapsed more than once. As you stroll slowly through the interior in your mind, you might begin to notice what the casual visitor misses. In the apse, a serene Virgin Mary holds the infant Christ. But here, too, there were tensions. For Byzantium was a land of theological storms. Arianism, Nestorianism, Monophysitism. These were not idle debates, but fierce, identity-shaping conflicts. And the Hagia Sophia, like a patient witness, absorbed it all. At times, its mosaics were stripped or whitewashed. Icons were removed or hidden. Later, you might pause now at a particular spot just left of the entrance. A simple marble column stands there, with a small circular hole worn into it. There are other stories, secret passages said to run beneath the building. And yet, the Hagia Sophia was not built simply to impress. As you let the image of the great dome fade gently into the background of your thoughts, now gently let your thoughts drift away from the vaulted ceilings and golden mosaics of the Hagia Sophia, and picture yourself turning a corner in ancient Constantinople, heading uphill toward the city's beating heart, the great palace. It is not one building, but a complex, a vast, sprawling arrangement of halls, courtyards, fountains, and at its core, behind each silk curtain and guarded door, lived something delicate and dangerous: power, and colonnades that cling to the edge of the city's sea-facing slope. It is a place where a misplaced word or even a Tuanist silence might echo further than one expects. From here, the emperor could gaze across the Bosporus, past fishing boats and merchant sails, out to the watery edge of empire. The marble beneath your feet is veined and cool, catching the morning light in quiet pools of reflection. The air carries the scent of citrus from the Imperial gardens nearby. Trained in languages, diplomacy, scripture, and law, he might control access to the emperor, influence appointments, and oversee imperial correspondence. Every decree required layers of authentication, and the sacrum consistorium, the emperor's high council, deliberated endlessly on policies and petitions. Here again, the rhythm was glacial but relentless. Promises had to be weighed. Loyalty had to be tested, then tested again. Then, one morning, a summons arrives not from the emperor himself, but from a quiet man in a darker robe. His house quietly emptied, his robes passed to another. A request to explain a certain decision, a discrepancy in a document, a forgotten favor owed, or an empire. With a whisper, he could alter the fate of a bishop. Meals were served in silence, unless the emperor spoke first. Onlookers wept with devotion or fear. Guests were seated according to strict hierarchies, the angle of the chairs themselves conveying status. Musicians played slow, haunting melodies on lyres and flutes. Even laughter was calculated. Too much, and one risked suspicion. Too little, and one appeared cold or ungrateful. They moved through the imperial halls with subtlety and precision, acting as gatekeepers, advisors, spies, and even generals. Even the mosaics, with their staring eyes, seemed to observe. Servants disappeared. Alliances shifted like fog across the Bosporus, and yet the silks were refolded, the candles relit, the scrolls rinked. Always incense. An emperor could dine surrounded by smiling courtiers, only to be smothered in his sleep by men who had bowed just hours before. You pass through each threshold in reverse marble velvet stone, sun until you're once more outside under the pale evening sky, hearing only the distant gulls and the rhythmic lap of the sea against the city walls. And something else, incense. This palace was no cozy dwelling. It was a labyrinth, a city within a city. But it was a world built not just on war or wealth, but on rituals, roles, and routines. An empire of paper, of ceremony, of careful watching. We gently return to the world we know, the one where the night hums softly outside your window. The golden dome of the Hagia Sophia glows faintly beneath a slow-turning sky, and the only court intrigue is the rustle of a blanket being adjusted. Castrated often as children, they were considered uniquely suited for palace service. They posed no threat of dynasty, no temptation, no lineage of their own. The Sea of Marmara is still. Even the palace, so full of schemes and rustling silk, slips into shadow its windows, reflecting only stars. And so they could move freely between the emperor's chambers and the empress's quarters, between war councils and sacred chapels. Let yourself walk slowly through the outer courts, where guards stand in ceremonial silence and petitioners wait, unsure if they will be granted entry. The farther in you go, the more the world changes. You've sat among tired clerks in Constantinople, surrounded by scrolls that felt heavier than the empire itself. You've listened to the rise and fall of Empress Theodora, a woman who stitched herself into the very fabric of power. You've explored the mysteries folded into mosaics, hidden in the sacred walls of the Hagia Sophia. And you've stood beneath silk curtains and silver lanterns, where emperors both rose and unraveled behind closed doors. Here, whispers hold more weight than shouts. Every glance has consequence. Life in the palace followed its own rhythm. Ceremonial processions through the chalk gate, where the emperor emerged robed in heavy silks embroidered with gold thread, his crown resting not on his head but suspended above it by a chain, signifying that even he served a higher power. There were rituals for waking, for dressing, for entering a room. The emperor, even when alone, was never truly unobserved. He was the basileus, the chosen of God, and yet he could never truly relax. Every servant's bow, every eunuch's gesture, every advisor's pause held potential meanings. Let's begin with those closest to the imperial body, the eunuchs. These were men who were not quite men, at least in the eyes of society. But to think of eunuchs merely as attendants would be to miss the strange brilliance of their role. Many were highly educated. The most trusted among them the prepositus, sacri cubiculi, or grand chamberlain, often wielded more influence than any nobleman. Beyond the eunuchs were the scribes, the secretaries, and the handlers of seals. But within these corridors, no one's position was ever truly secure. Imagine an official rising steadily through the ranks. A lifetime spent mastering protocol, decoding the imperial will, making himself useful but not threatening. By sunset, the official's name may be struck from the rolls. Ribbons of red fabric led the emperor's horse. Banners snapped gently in the wind. In the palace, memory was long, but mercy short. To live here was to live in a permanent performance. And then, of course, there were the spectacles. On high feast days, the palace unfolded its splendor for all to see. The palace staff orchestrated these displays with delicate precision. Yet for all its order and grandeur, the palace was also a place of paranoia. Walls had ears, courtyards had watchers. Still, the court endured. New emperors arrived. Some were installed by generals, others by mobs, still others by scheming chamberlains. Power did not sleep, even when the city did. You are far from it. Now, imagine yourself slowly backing away from those inner chambers where the air feels almost too still. The great palace has closed its doors behind you, and with it, 1,000 secrets have returned to silence. And now, as the whispers of the imperial palace grow quiet, and the footsteps of eunuchs, scribes, and sovereigns fade into marble shadows, you've walked through the flickering lamplit corridors of the Byzantine bureaucracy, and every word recorded in ink thick with significance. This empire, so strange and formal, so precise and formal, so precise and paranoid, was not a world that many could survive, let alone master. And now, no court petitions await your signature. No wax seals need pressing. No anxious glance over the shoulder. Just the quiet comfort of stillness, of a soft bed and a long night, uninterrupted. Outside your mind's eye, the city of Constantinople dims. Let it go. Let the rituals and rules dissolve. There are no scrolls to copy here. No emperor's favor to earn, just breath, slow and steady. Sleep may come softly, like the hush of distant water against ancient stone. Let it find you. Good night.